Wednesday evening, Rex Tillerson was sworn in as the next Secretary of State. The Senate confirmed Tillerson with a final vote of 56 to 43. The former CEO of Exxon will be charged with shaping the Trump administration's foreign policy. This comes as President Trump's Supreme Court pick, federal appeals court Judge Neil Gorsuch, met with several senators on Capitol Hill, while Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer blasted the president's approval of using the so-called nuclear option to push Gorsuch through. CBS News senior political editor Steve Chaggaris is in Washington. All right, so Steve, I want to start with the Supreme Court. Judge Neil Gorsuch won unanimous approval by the Senate when he was up for appeals court judge in 2006, and Chuck Schumer was among those senators who approved him. How much of the current Democratic opposition you think is due to Republicans refusing to consider President Obama's nominee, Merrick Garland?
There's no question that's part of this. You've heard Democratic senators say that's part of this, but that's one part of it. Part of it also is just the hyper-partisanship that's been going on in Washington, and especially liberal Democrats saying you've got to oppose Trump, we've got to stop the things he's doing, we've got to stop his cabinet picks, we've got to stop his Supreme Court picks, and so there's part of that as well. And then part of this too, Elaine, to be honest with you, is that this is automatically what happens with every Supreme Court pick. I was doing some research going all the way back to David Souter, if you remember, in 1990, was nominated by George H.W. Bush, and Democrats automatically came out and said, we oppose him from the first day he was nominated. And it turned out, ironically, that Souter wound up being a more liberal judge than anybody thought. So it's part of the deal is that Democrats are going to oppose a Republican president's picks, and Republicans will oppose a Democratic president's picks.
Well, it was interesting, Steve. On Wednesday, we heard President Trump encourage Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell to, quote unquote, go nuclear if Neil Gorsuch's confirmation gets held up. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some Democrats are seeing that as sort of a threat to say going nuclear. Well, that's sort of threatening behavior from the president. I think it's a lot easier for the president to say that than it is to actually get done. Republicans aren't even totally sold on the idea of going nuclear. And keep in mind, there's going to be a whole process here. This isn't going to be like Merrick Garland in the sense that there is going to be a confirmation hearing, and we don't know how Democrats are going to react during those confirmation hearings and afterwards, and how many Democrats may jump aboard the Gorsuch train after that. So if they can get 8 people on the Democratic side, they don't need to worry about the nuclear option. Of course, if a filibuster is brewing, then Republicans are going to have to make a decision, and they are weighing whether they should do that or not, because frankly, if they do use the nuclear option, they're changing precedent. They're setting precedent, and this could come back and bite them if they're in the minority.
On another topic, Steve, the president was previously expected to sign an executive order aimed at improving the country's cybersecurity on Tuesday. That didn't happen. Do we have any further information on that potential order or any others that may come up?
Well, we do know a little bit about that cyber order, and part of it is that they're going to ask basically the government they're going to look at the cyber threats that are facing the government, do a deep look at it, and then try to change some things. First of all, move the cyber threat oversight to the Office of Management and Budget, and they're also going to basically hold department secretaries responsible for any risks that happen within their agencies. So that's a big change. Now, why it got held up? The question or the thinking is that they saw what happened with the travel ban executive order, and there's some discussion that perhaps they're sort of slow rolling this a little bit to make sure that everybody who's going to be involved, and this is a government-wide executive action, everybody who's going to be involved is on the same page with this, so the rollout could be a little bit smoother than what happened with that travel ban.
Yeah. Something else, Steve, that is getting some attention. At a meeting with African American supporters, President Trump launched another attack on the media. Then, in what was meant to mark the start of African American History Month, the president said, Frederick Douglass is an example of somebody who has done an amazing job and is being recognized more and more, I notice. Douglass, of course, was an abolitionist and former slave who died in 1895. But I wonder here, Steve, in terms of messaging, is this perhaps another example of the president stepping on his own message?
Yeah, I mean, come on, we watched this guy now for a couple of years, Elaine, and we know he's a walking gaffe machine, right? I mean, we remember last June, when he referred to a supporter in the audience at a California rally calling him my African American. You remember when he was talking about a Bible verse and he referred to it as 2 Corinthians.
Right.
He just is not necessarily totally smooth with language and communication, especially when it comes to topics that he doesn't really necessarily know a ton about, and it's pretty clear that Donald Trump does not have a lot of knowledge of African American history. So I think what we're seeing here is just another example of Trump just getting his communication mixed up, and it's really, again, as I said, he tends to do this a lot. He's been a gaffe machine when it comes to these kinds of things.
Always interesting to watch, though. Steve Chaggaris in Washington. Steve, good to see you. Thanks.
You too, Elaine.